is none among them more iconic than Cleopatra.
I would die for Egypt. What would you die for?
What a load of shit.
There is no Rome without Egypt.
What the hell are you talking about?
I did what I had to do to protect what is mine.
This is a woman exercising power.
Dirty hoe.
I imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
Shut when you think of God.
And now for something completely different.
Exhibit A.
I think I made my point.
Her story resonates with every woman.
Also,
This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country.
this is absolutely correct!
Hey, random angry Egyptians and everyone else. Your crazy Dragonslayer is finally back after escaping the asylum, and today we're going to be talking about the worst disaster that mankind has ever experienced collectively to date after the Great Flood of Noah and the bubonic plagues, the Cleopatra Netflix show. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering if I'm gonna do an ultra-comprehensive review of the show, but after thinking about it for a long while, I decided not to go at it as hard with the usual nitpicking I do, for the simple reason that besides the obvious blackface they did to Cleopatra and glossing over very important minor historical details that can give much needed context to Cleopatra's actions, the story being told in the documentary is pretty much the same one you have heard in hundreds of documentaries made prior to this one. However, since I was one of those madmen that decided to watch the entire show in a single day, at least let me tell you what I remember and how I felt while watching this dumpster fire. So buckle up, because it's going to be a short but sweet ride, and if you're still hungry for some more content after you watch this video, then I have a Demolition Man review I released some time ago that I think you'll enjoy, plus more of my content in my channel homepage. Now let's begin this review blitzkrieg, shall we?
Given that Cleopatra represents herself as an Egyptian, it seems very strange that we insist on depicting her as a wholly European.
God damn! Everybody knows you never go full retard. You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
So, the first thing this official Netflix documentary series tries to establish right off the bat is that this isn't your parents' documentary. No, no, no. This is a new age feminist documentary full of extreme pandering to Cleopatra to the point where they try to portray her as a misunderstood hero and then uses indiscriminate race swapping while having a historian panel made up of 2 black female feminists, 1 diversity hire male panelist whose name will make every Muslim in Egypt yell haram in unison, a time-traveling feminist Egyptologist from the 1920s, and then 2 white female historians that always have that look in their faces like they're being held at gunpoint every time they talk about Cleopatra's skin color or personality, whose only objective is to trick people into believing that Jada Smith's fantasy of Cleopatra is an actual historical documentary.
Holy shit. Guaranteed disaster.
Before I continue, however, let me tell you guys right off the bat that I'm not a historian, but I am an ancient history buff who enjoys researching the time period of Julius Caesar and ancient Rome, so there's my disclaimer. Now, let me get this part out of the way first by stating the obvious that Cleopatra was not black, and never in her life would she have had these kinds of hairstyles that are being shown in this show for these simple reasons. Number 1, after much painstaking research by historians, it has already been confirmed several times now that Cleopatra was of Macedonian Greek heritage due to her family's lineage from Ptolemy I, but she was from a dynasty that was notoriously known for constantly murdering or inbreeding between siblings in order to acquire stable power and maintain the purity of their bloodline. Now, if this sounds oddly similar to the Targaryen family from Game of Thrones, then it's because George R.R. Martin took inspiration from this real-life dynasty of inbreeds.
Because the more you know.
Oh, that's nasty.
Number 2. Cleopatra would have never worn the hairstyle shown in the show simply due to two reasons, which are that her Macedonian Greek heritage would have given her long curly black hair that she would have put gold braids on it because that was the style of royalty at the time of ancient Egypt, or she would have followed the ancient Egyptian tradition of shaving off all her body hair for sanitary reasons and wear many beautiful elaborate wigs made of human hair by her slaves instead, as was the norm. The reason for that was quite simple. Ancient Egypt is a very hot and dry place, so their customs of shaving off all their body hair made sense because it helped people avoid acquiring lice and infectious diseases that are commonly generated via body hair, which generates a very humid environment for bacteria to grow.
There, easy as pie.
The other problem this show has is with its production quality. You see, every time I watched an episode, I would easily notice how some of the costumes felt lazily designed, as if they got them from the dollar store, because just look at this. What the fuck is this, Jada? Did you get help from a rookie designer or a homeless crackhead to do these costume designs for you? You're making a historical documentary, so can you please try hard for once in your life? You've already pissed off all of Egypt, and now you're trying to piss off set costume designers all over the world? The Elizabeth Taylor movie had better designed costumes than your shitty show, and that was a historical drama. Also, the show itself with its acting and music choices is making me think that I'm watching a low-budget CW show that for some reason was labeled as a historical documentary rather than a docudrama, and if you think that what I'm saying is insane, then how about I ask my editor Boxman to show you exactly what I mean so you can see it from another perspective.
That everyone can imagine her in their own way. I imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
Shelley, I don't care what they tell you in school. Cleopatra was black.
Imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
Okay, so the last two things I want to touch on is how they treat Julius Caesar and Mark Antony in this show, but also how they portray Cleopatra as a feminist icon. First off, Julius Caesar was about 52 years old when he met the 21-year-old Cleopatra and decided to forge both a political alliance and a sexual partnership even though he had a wife at home. But back in those times, he was known to be quite the ladies' man and a capable commander, so as a result, his street cred was strong with everyone except the corrupt Senate.
This is not going to end well.
Now, this is my question to Jada. How the fuck do you get this and come up with this? How in the hell did Julius Caesar get a hold of a barber shop to get this kind of haircut? You can tell this man has a full head of hair just by how much of it is coming out of his scalp.
Oh, for frank's sake.
This was a man who was once known as one of the biggest controlling narcissists on Earth because of his obsession with his fading hair and wanting to acquire more power over people. But Jada Smith over here turned him into an easily deceivable edgy chump who Cleopatra always outsmarts, even though historically speaking, old Caesar already knew what kind of manipulating woman she was. And to give Jada some credit, the man they cast as Caesar is going to technically turn 52 years old this year, so I guess you get a minimum point for at least trying the bare minimum, but it's still doesn't excuse this desert dry, lifeless product you call a documentary, you history wrecker.
Yeah, you think you can fool us?
As for Mark Antony, the show portrays him as this pig of a man that the only thing he ever cares about is intercourse with Cleopatra rather than protecting Rome and becoming an Eastern king, but in reality he was obsessed with protecting Rome from his political rival Octavian to the point where he decided to make the smart move at the time and ally himself with Cleopatra to rule over all of Rome as emperor. However, he lost the war simply because his army was not as experienced in battle like Octavian's, which is why he was defeated so easily. A small detail that this documentary decided to gloss over, since its only objective is to push the feminist narrative Jada Smith desires.
This is absolutely correct!
Speaking of which, I'm sorry to tell you ladies this, but in ancient times, a woman of royal blood sleeping around with as many powerful men as they could get their hands on while having children with them that they could use as bargaining chips in the future to have a secure political position was actually quite the norm.
Are you serious?
The women of Roman patrician families and of other ancient cultures practiced this kind of art because in those times, a woman's greatest strengths if born into royalty or nobility were her physical looks, how good they were in bed, how many children they had to use as political bargaining chips, and how they could use their minds to manipulate other family members or trusted family allies into doing the things that they wanted them to do to accomplish so that they could easily get rid of their political enemies without dirtying their hands in the process.
That's f***ed up.
Also, if you want to avoid dirtying your own hands by having someone else watch and review the terrible shit Hollywood is offering us today, then how about you go ahead and do what you're seeing on screen right now to avoid permanent neuron damage. I guarantee you that you won't live to regret your choice, unlike Jada Smith with her show.
Fun and good for your health.
One more thing, every time Jada and these historians try to prop up Cleopatra as their ancient feminist symbol of a strong, independent woman, I would just bust out laughing at their feeble attempts, because at the end of the day, the history doesn't lie that Cleopatra was actually the most extreme case of what happens when a woman of royal bloodline tries greedily to use their natural educated charms to acquire more power, but instead their plans end up backfiring on them because they made the wrong choice of supporting and sleeping with the wrong man.
In other words,
Fool of a took.
That's cold, sir.
but it's definitely true.
Look, let me save you guys hours of watching the shitty piece of media by telling you that this show is a 2 out of 10 for me, because the only thing I got out of it was that I found out a little known fact that most of Cleopatra's children, except Caesarion, survived the ordeal their mother put them through and later gave birth to dynasties of their own children, which is all fine and dandy, but it wasn't worth putting up with what amounts to almost 4 hours of a documentary telling us information that we've already learned from previous and better produced documentaries.
What?
No, you're not serious.
Also, calling this show a documentary is an insult to the genre, because documentaries are supposed to provide you with the facts that were present at the time it was made of a specific historical topic, while the newer ones provide you with the same information plus some extra detailed information that may not have been available at the time of the earlier documentaries. This documentary does not belong in this genre because all that Jada Smith and the producers of this show did was use an actual historical figure, hijack it by casting her as a race that was not the one she was described as being in the ancient accounts, and then use her story as a way to portray not only their modern feminist ideology, but also their obsession with black power hegemony, instead of making an actual well-researched series about an actual less-known yet remarkable black African queen.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
However, we already know that Jada Smith would never do that, because most of those African queens she touts so much about don't have the same popular clout that Cleopatra does with the normie audiences, and as a result she ended up achieving the impossible by creating a show that has been more disastrously received than Rings of Power.
Yo! Hold up! Time out! Time out!
That's impossible. How does that work?
Now, my friends, that's everything I have for you today, but if you're still hungry for some longer reviews, then remember to check out my Demolition Man review and all the other wonderful reviews I have available on my channel as well. And as for staying aware of when a new video comes out, just check out either my Twitter or YouTube community post, as I am regularly active on both, and I let people know when a new video is coming out. Other than that, the Little Mermaid review will eventually come out, but I still wish you all a wonderful day, and Namarie.